The healing rain, working through sadness and sorrow. Back to contentment. The wise gardener does not curse the winter rain that floods the garden beds, washing away carefully tended plantings and leaving mud where beauty once flourished. She understands that this same water, however destructive it appears in the moment, carries essential minerals from distant mountains and prepares the soil for new growth that could never emerge without this season of dissolution and renewal. With love as your foundation and contentment as your stable inner climate, you now approach one of the most crucial skills for authentic contentment cultivation, learning to work skillfully with sadness, grief, and sorrow as natural elements of the complete emotional ecosystem, rather than obstacles to be overcome or storms to be endured. In the mountain gardens of ancient monasteries, where contemplative communities have tended both soil and soul for centuries, you will find a curious practice among the most experienced gardeners. When the heavy rains come, washing away months of careful cultivation and leaving the terraced beds muddy and seemingly ruined, these gardeners do not retreat in despair. Instead, they venture out into the storm, barefoot and mindful, to observe what the water reveals about the deeper structure of their land. They have learned through decades of patient attention that what appears as destruction often functions as necessary preparation. The flooding exposes problems in drainage that sunny weather concealed. The washing away of surface plantings reveals which root systems had developed true strength and which had remained shallow and vulnerable. Most importantly, the apparent devastation creates space for new growth that could never have emerged in gardens too densely packed with existing vegetation. These gardeners understand something profound about the emotional weather of human consciousness. Sadness and sorrow, like seasonal storms, serve essential functions in the complete ecosystem of authentic living. They are not malfunctions to be eliminated or storms to be waited out with gritted teeth, but natural processes that carry their own form of nourishment for growth that cannot occur through sunshine alone. The natural ecology of emotional weather. Just as no garden exists without both gentle rain and cleansing storms, cool mornings and warm afternoons, the landscape of human consciousness includes inevitable seasons of sadness that serve biological, psychological, and spiritual functions in the complete ecosystem of contentment. The gardener who expects only perfect weather will remain perpetually frustrated, while the one who understands emotional weather patterns can work skillfully with whatever conditions arise. Consider how depression researcher Martin Seligman's groundbreaking work revealed what contemplatives have long observed. Mild sadness often produces more accurate assessments of reality than artificial optimism. Like plants that conserve energy and direct resources toward root development during winter months, the temporary slowing that sadness creates often facilitates deeper self-knowledge and more realistic planning than the manic activity that characterizes forced positivity. This depressive realism functions like a gardener's soil test that reveals pH levels, nutrient deficiencies, and drainage problems invisible during periods of apparent abundance. The person experiencing appropriate sadness after job loss may develop more accurate understanding of career values and realistic assessment of next steps than someone who maintains artificial cheerfulness that prevents necessary reflection and planning. Yet just as gardens require more than soil analysis to flourish, human consciousness needs more than accurate reality assessment to maintain emotional health. The key lies in understanding sadness as temporary weather that provides valuable information and creates optimal conditions for certain types of growth, while developing skills to work productively with these conditions rather than being overwhelmed by them. Understanding the wisdom of sadness, the science of emotional rain. Paul Ekman's research identifying sadness as a basic human emotion shared across all cultures suggests evolutionary functions that contribute to survival and social bonding. Like steady rain that signals plants to adjust growth patterns, sadness creates internal conditions that serve adaptation and relationship formation. Sadness as gentle, persistent rain. The neurochemistry of sadness functions like rain affecting soil conditions in ways that serve long-term garden health. When sadness activates stress response systems, resulting changes encourage introspection, energy conservation, and social support seeking that often prove adaptive during challenging circumstances. Research by Joseph Forgas demonstrates that mild sadness improves attention to detail, reduces gullibility, and enhances memory for important information. Like plants developing stronger root systems when energy cannot be directed toward growth, people experiencing appropriate sadness often develop deeper self-knowledge than those who avoid emotional processing through constant activity. The social functions of sadness mirror how plant stress signals attract beneficial organisms. Appropriate sadness expression often elicits support and care from others, strengthening social bonds and revealing relationship resources invisible during periods of apparent strength. The biochemical soil conditions. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's work on emotion and decision-making reveals how temporary sadness changes brain chemistry in ways that support careful evaluation and conservative decision-making during uncertain periods. Like soil pH changes that make certain nutrients more available while temporarily reducing others, sadness creates mental conditions optimal for reflection, meaning-making, and priority clarification, even as it reduces capacity for high-energy activities and optimistic planning. The neurochemical environment of appropriate sadness includes increased production of acetylcholine, which enhances focus and attention to environmental details, and temporary reduction in dopamine, which decreases reward-seeking behavior while encouraging consolidation of existing resources and relationships rather than pursuit of new stimulation. This biochemical profile serves similar functions to how plants respond to drought stress by closing stomata to conserve water while directing resources toward root system strengthening. Temporary sadness often encourages deeper investment in existing relationships and more careful evaluation of life choices rather than impulsive seeking of new experiences or relationships that might not provide adequate support during challenging periods. Working skillfully with different types of emotional weather. Adaptive sadness, the nourishing spring rain. Adaptive sadness responds appropriately to life circumstances and serves clear psychological functions, including processing loss, signaling need for support, encouraging reflection, and motivating necessary life changes. Like spring rain that nourishes new growth while clearing winter debris, adaptive sadness creates optimal conditions for renewal and development when approached with skilled attention. The person experiencing adaptive sadness after relationship ending may use this emotional weather for reflection on relationship patterns, appreciation for positive aspects of concluded partnership, development of individual identity that may have been neglected during couple-focused life, and clarification of values and needs for future relationships. This type of sadness typically includes natural fluctuation between more intense and lighter periods, responsiveness to support and self-care activities, and gradual resolution as adaptation occurs and new life patterns develop. Like spring weather that alternates between rain and sunshine while trending toward warmer, more stable conditions, adaptive sadness naturally shifts toward renewed engagement as processing completes. Practical navigation. Steps for adaptive sadness. Immediate response protocol. When adaptive sadness arises, follow the sequence rather than trying to eliminate or escape the emotional weather. Recognition and acceptance. I notice sadness is present. This is natural emotional weather that serves important functions. Physical care. Ensure basic needs are met, adequate sleep, nutritious food, gentle movement, while reducing non-essential stressors that might complicate emotional processing. Meaning-making space. Create time for reflection through journaling, meditation, or conversation with trusted friends about what this sadness might be teaching or revealing. Social connection. Reach out to supportive relationships without requiring others to fix your emotional weather, simply seeking connection and presence during temporary difficulty. Purposeful engagement. Maintain involvement with meaningful activities even when motivation feels low, allowing purposeful action to support emotional processing rather than waiting for mood improvement before engagement. Weekly assessment questions. Is this sadness helping me process something important or just creating suffering without purpose? What information or insights is this emotional weather providing about my life circumstances? How can I care for myself during this period while maintaining engagement with relationships and responsibilities? Are there practical changes this sadness is encouraging me to consider? The deeper waters of sorrow. When healing rains become stagnant floods. While sadness functions like beneficial rain, clinical depression resembles flooding that creates stagnant conditions where nothing healthy can grow. Understanding this distinction helps differentiate between emotional weather serving natural functions and conditions requiring intervention. Depression as stagnant water. When emotional flooding persists beyond adaptive duration, standing water creates conditions where beneficial processes cannot survive and toxic patterns proliferate. Depression often involves stuck emotional states that prevent the natural flow of feeling, processing, and integration characterizing healthy emotional weather. Warning signs: sadness persisting beyond several weeks without fluctuation, complete loss of interest in meaningful activities, persistent sleep/appetite changes, thoughts of self-harm, social isolation resisting gentle re-engagement, sorrow as deep pools. Unlike stagnant depression, sorrow operates like deep, still pools that form after profound experiences. These pools maintain depth and clarity through slow circulation, preserving essential wisdom dissolved from contact with life's deepest experiences. Sorrow often involves ongoing emotional presence that influences daily experience without dominating consciousness. These deeper pools provide wisdom and perspective that surface emotions cannot, creating capacity for profound empathy and mature appreciation for life's complexity. When to seek professional support. Persistent sadness lasting more than 6 weeks, significant disruption to daily functioning, thoughts of self-harm, substance use for emotional management, or family/friends expressing serious concern about behavioral changes. Comprehensive grief navigation, from storm to fertile ground. Understanding grief as necessary decomposition. In forest ecosystems, the apparent destruction caused by fallen trees creates optimal conditions for new growth through decomposition processes that release nutrients while creating clearings where sunlight can reach forest floor seedlings previously shaded by large canopies. Grief operates similarly, breaking down psychological attachments and identity structures that, while previously beneficial, may no longer serve current life circumstances. The grief process involves both loss processing and identity reconstruction as individuals adapt to life without relationships, roles, capabilities, or circumstances that previously provided meaning and structure. Like decomposition that transforms complex organic matter into simple nutrients available for new plant growth, grief gradually transforms intense attachment and loss into wisdom, compassion, and renewed capacity for connection. This transformation doesn't eliminate love for what was lost, but rather changes the form through which love continues expressing. The widow whose grief processing enables volunteer work with other bereaved spouses demonstrates how loss can become source of service and meaning rather than permanent limitation, while maintaining ongoing connection with deceased partner through changed but continuing bond. The stages as weather patterns. Rather than linear progression, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's identification of grief stages, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, provides useful map for understanding grief territory, but contemporary grief research reveals these as weather patterns that may cycle repeatedly rather than linear progression with definitive completion point. Like seasonal weather that may include unexpected cold snaps during spring or warm periods during autumn, grief involves cycling through different emotional states that may return multiple times throughout adaptation process. Understanding this cyclical nature prevents self-criticism when anger or sadness returns after periods of apparent acceptance, recognizing recurring emotional patterns as normal rather than indicators of inadequate processing. Practical grief. Weather navigation, denial weather. When this pattern appears, practice gentle reality acceptance without forcing acknowledgement beyond current capacity. Create space for gradual recognition while maintaining necessary life functions and relationships. Anger weather. Use anger energy for appropriate action, including advocacy, boundary setting, or life changes while avoiding harmful expressions towards self or others. Physical exercise, creative expression, and social action can channel anger constructively. Bargaining weather. Notice attempts to negotiate with reality or past circumstances, using this mental activity for exploring what remains possible and valuable while accepting what cannot be changed or recovered. Depression, weather, apply sadness, navigation skills while monitoring for concerning symptoms requiring professional support. Maintain meaning-making activities and social connections even when motivation feels absent. Acceptance, weather. Appreciate periods of peace and integration without expecting permanent resolution. Use acceptance phases for planning, relationship building, and engagement with emerging life possibilities. Practical integration. Your personal weather station. Daily emotional weather monitoring. Unlike basic mood tracking applications that reduce complex emotional experience to simple ratings, sophisticated emotional awareness involves developing meteorologist-level skills for reading internal conditions, predicting likely changes, and preparing appropriate responses to weather patterns that serve personal and community well-being. Morning weather assessment. Begin each day with this internal weather check without judgment. What emotional weather exists today? Name specific emotions without requiring change. What does this weather suggest about optimal activities and self-care approaches? How can I honor this emotional weather while maintaining engagement with responsibilities and relationships? Midday weather adjustment. Check whether emotional weather has shifted and adjust daily engagement accordingly. Has emotional weather changed since morning, requiring different self-care or activity modification? Are there warning signs of storm intensification requiring additional support or reduced commitments? What resources, people, activities, environments best support current emotional weather conditions? Evening integration practice. Reflect on what today's emotional weather taught about personal patterns and effective self-care. What did I learn about working skillfully with today's emotional conditions? Which self-care approaches and social connections best supported navigation of emotional weather? How did engaging meaningfully with life activities affect emotional weather patterns? The compassionate storm shelter practice. Develop skills for providing refuge for others during emotional difficulty without trying to fix their weather or taking responsibility for their emotional processing. Practice empathetic listening, practical support, and maintaining your own emotional stability while offering presence without attachment to others' emotional outcomes. Shelter provision skills. Listen without offering solutions unless specifically requested. Provide practical assistance, meals, childcare, household help during emotional storms. Share presence without requiring emotional improvement from others. Maintain your emotional stability while remaining available for support. Boundary guidelines. Distinguish between supporting others and enabling emotional dependence. Provide shelter during storms while allowing others to develop emotional resilience. Recognize when emotional weather exceeds your capacity to provide adequate shelter. Create sustainable support relationships that honor everyone's long-term well-being. The grief gardening practice. When facing significant loss or sorrow, treat emotional processing like tending a garden that requires patient attention, appropriate conditions, and trust in natural healing processes. Create space for sadness without rushing toward resolution. Engage in activities that provide gentle nourishment, and maintain connection with sources of meaning and support. Grief garden elements. Protective boundaries. Limit exposure to additional stressors while emotional processing occurs. Nourishing activities, gentle exercise, creative expression, nature connection, and meaningful reading, social support. Trusted relationships, providing presence without pressure for emotional improvement. Meaning making, journaling, memorial activities, or service honoring what was lost while supporting continued living patient timeline. Allow emotions to flow naturally like water through garden landscapes without forcing healing schedule. Allow emotions to flow naturally like water through garden landscapes, trusting that grief, like seasonal rains, serves essential functions in the ecosystem of consciousness, while eventually contributing to renewed capacity for growth, appreciation, and engagement with life's continuing possibilities. The renewed garden, integration and growth, standing in soil enriched by countless seasons of rain, sun, snow, and wind, the master gardener understands that every type of weather has contributed essential elements to the ground that now supports abundant life. The storms that once seemed destructive revealed themselves as necessary preparation for growth that could not have emerged in perpetually mild conditions. Your emotional landscape, too, gains richness through the full spectrum of human weather. The sadness that teaches empathy, the sorrow that reveals what matters most deeply, the tears that clear space for new appreciation, the temporary shelter of withdrawal that enables processing and renewal, only have contributed to the fertile ground of consciousness where contentment can take root not despite difficulty, but through skillful engagement with the complete range of emotional experience. Each experience of processing sadness or sorrow skillfully adds to emotional capacity for future challenge navigation. The skills learned through working with one difficult situation typically transfer to other challenges, creating expanding capability for handling emotional weather with competence and grace. Like gardeners who develop expertise through managing various plant diseases and weather challenges, emotional resilience builds through accumulated experience of successful difficulty navigation. The rain has passed, leaving behind earth dark with moisture and potential. Seeds that lay dormant in dry soil now stir with possibility. Plants that seem destroyed reveal new shoots emerging from strengthened root systems. The garden is not the same as before the storm, but transformed into something more resilient, more beautiful, more capable of supporting the full flowering of what wants to grow in the depths of your becoming. This foundation of emotional weather navigation, built upon love's wellspring and contentment's stable climate, now prepares you for the profound work of acceptance that awaits in our next chapter. There you will discover how embracing imperfection and impermanence, the Japanese art of wabi-sabi, creates appreciation for beauty within brokenness, while maintaining the discernment to act skillfully when action serves healing and growth. Your capacity to work with sadness and sorrow as natural weather, rather than obstacles to contentment, represents profound wisdom that serves both personal authenticity and community well-being, enabling you to offer shelter to others during their storms while maintaining access to the inner peace that supports continued engagement with life's meaning and purpose throughout all seasons of existence.